and gentlemen. How are we all? Wonderful, wonderful. Back for another session of our Old Home Store Spot Catcher series with the wonderful Paul Wallace. Round of applause if you would like. I'm going to dive straight in. We've got a couple of late comers on the way, so just bear with us when we get to noisy people arriving. So, how are you feeling?
A little nervous.
You had a chat with Serena beforehand. Are you remembering the skills she taught you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how about we start with a little bit about you and who is Paul Wallace?
Some people won't believe this, but actually a very shy person.
You were just singing.
Yes. So put me in a room of strangers and I'm the one stood in the corner waiting for someone to walk in the door that I know. Give me a stage and a microphone, however.
And the songs come out. Oh, okay. I hear you're a Southampton boy, or a Hampshire boy, should I say?
Yes, born in Lymington, brought up in Hounsdown, near Totton, which used to be the largest village in the country until 1974 when it became a town.
Oh, see?
Yeah. Brought up by my mother.
Yeah, keep going. What else do we need to know about you?
Brought up by my mother. My mother and father got divorced when I was born.
Uh-huh.
So I've never lived in the same house as my mother and father.
Ever?
Ever.
Never ever. Why is this important to the story, Paul?
I guess the early things that happen in your life set out the stall for how you're going to become.
How do you think that growing up as a child has shaped or affected who you are, how you work today?
There were different things that happened, some good, some bad. So for example, when I started school, I was probably the only person in my class that had a split family. And then all my friends were very jealous at Christmas because I had 2 Christmas days and they only had 1. So that was very good. And then later on in life, I did some things which are a little unique. So at the age of 14, I was the best man at my father's 3rd wedding. He eventually had 4 wives, didn't know when to stop. And at the age of 16, I gave my mother away to her 2nd husband, the man with whom she would spend the rest of her life. So I guess not many people get to do that.
Just turning the music off.
Okay.
With me. Okay. Okay, so a bit of a comedian as well.
Sometimes.
Yeah?
Sometimes.
You always have a kiss and a cuddle.
Yeah.
Don't tell the wife.
Okay, you might have just done that. That's that cat out of the bag. Awkward. Ask me about the most outrageous thing I've ever done on stage.
That is the next question.
That was the next question. I just didn't want to miss that one out.
No, we're not going to. So,
Okay.
Paul, I've got another question for you.
Okay.
What's the most outrageous thing you've ever done on stage? I even read it as well, right?
So with 2 other men, we dressed up in the full regalia as the 3 degrees, hair, lipstick, false breasts, stockings, the lot. And in a competition, entertainment competition, with about 6 or 7 other entrants, in front of only a small crowd, about 250, 300, we sung "When Will I See You Again?" And we won.
Yeah.
Actually, the video is on YouTube.
Yeah.
He's
going to project it in a second.
Yeah, I think I might do breakfast at Bond and start with that.
Yeah. Nobody's laughing. I think you should actually do that.
Okay. I'll get the other 2 guys round.
Okay, so a few interesting facts and some fun stories. But then at some point you get a job and a career. Where did career start? What was your first job?
I was a marine electrical apprenticeship on Town Quay. Did that for 2 years before I got the sack for not going to college.
Wonderful. Yeah.
And then spent a few years doing other little jobs like selling insurance and making sheds and fences for the New Forest,
Love that.
which I point out to my daughters every time we go to the New Forest. I might have made that gate every time.
And then what happened in 1986?
So that was the period where my life changed, because I got a job at a company that was then called RIC, later became Cambridge Capacitors in Romsey. And that's when I got introduced to quality management systems and my lovely wife, who's sat just there. So we met as in January 1986, had our first date June the 5th, 1986. And we got married on August the 8th, 1987.
Wow, okay.
And we're getting divorced in a minute.
So this job that you got at that time completely changed it. At the time you wouldn't have known, but now we know that completely changed your life.
Yes, both personally, as I've just said, but also it was my introduction to quality management systems, just literally by default. I was a test technician, and my boss became the quality manager, and I suddenly became a quality test technician overnight, and helped the company implement what was then BS 5750 and AQAP 1, which was a military standard.
Yeah, you're talking another language to me now.
Yeah.
So, what was that last thing you just said?
AQAP, AQAP
And what is that?
1. That was a military standard based around BS 5750.
What's BS 5750?
That was a British standard for having a quality management system within a manufacturing organisation.
Is this one of your chat points?
Yeah. See, this is where compliance does get really boring. So we,
Rich just made it really sexy there. So
yeah.
we're on good track. Okay, so then we're in ISO compliance, as I know it has.
Yes.
And you've been in that world for 37 years now?
Yeah, so like I said, I started when I was 20. I'm now 57, so I've been doing it, yes, for 37 years.
But in the beginning, you did it for some years, and then Hantec was born.
Yeah, so I moved around, had a couple of jobs with companies where I was quality manager, and then eventually in June '93, I became a quality consultant, and Hantec Systems was born in October 1995, so it is now 28 years old.
I have to ask, what was it that you latched onto with ISO?
I didn't. It kind of latched on to me. As I said, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, or wrong place at the right time, where have you look at it. But I just found that I had an ability to pick up a standard or a regulation, read it, and understand it and help people implement it. It was just my forte. Some people can pick up the guitar and just play it. I can pick up a standard and just read it and do it.
Does anybody have interest in the audience? Does anybody have compliance, risk management? Anybody understand it? Got lots of nods, that's good. Anybody not understand it? So still a few. There's a mix. It's always going to be a mix.
Well, can I just, when many people say to me, well, first of all, when they ask, what do you do? I meet them for the first time. I say, I help my clients make more money and stay out of jail. So that attracts their attention for another 3 seconds until I mention the ISO word. And then a lot of the time people will say, ISO, no, we have no call for it, which I find really interesting. We've got this banner up because the projector's broken, so we haven't got the fire. And I say, okay, so you're not interested in all of these things, improved profit, sustainable growth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And anybody that says they're not interested in these don't have a very successful company. So what they're really saying when they say there's no call for ISO is that there's no call for certification, which I get. I get that. But we use ISO as the platform. It's a consequence of what we do. It's not what we do. This is what we do. As a consequence, if it's important to you, you're ready for certification to multiple standards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and actually looking at these 7 points, especially that P word at the top, that is all I've been doing for the last 4 months. Processes. And it's really important because it does generate the value and the leads and makes your life a little easier as an employee.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Okay, so we are setting up Hantec. We are learning throughout the years. Then the birth of Hantec. Who and what is and who and what are Hantec? Where does the name come from?
So I was sat with a client, and my boss phoned me because I was still employed at the time.
Yep.
And I had said to him, we were doing a lot of work in the security industry at the time, intruder alarms, access control. And in the early 90s, the government of the day they had an initiative where they were giving out loads of free money to companies to implement ISO 9000. And as is always the case when government give out money to companies, all of the big companies, they thank you very much, and they mop it all up. And all of the little companies get none of it because no one seems to care about the little companies. And I said to my boss at the time, look, we're doing all this work in the security industry. They all do things the same way. And to get them on the ladder, what they need is a set of procedures and a set of processes called a control manual, it was called back then. I said, why don't we just put together a standard one, sell it very cheap for 250 quid. That gets them on the ladder, and then they'll come back to us for ISO. And he made a big mistake. He said, no, I'm not going to do that, but I will allow you to do it. So he allowed me to start my own company whilst I was still employed. So we did that in October 1995. I was sat with this client, and he phoned me up and he said, I'm just writing an article for a security magazine, and I'm going to make reference to your control manual, but I need a company name. He said, I think you should call it SecTech Systems, which is abbreviation of Security Technical Systems.
And a dyslexic nightmare, I understand.
And I said, okay. And I then sat there talking to my client, and for the next hour, she was talking to me, and I wasn't listening to one word that she was saying because I was thinking, I don't like that name. And then I thought I invented a word. And I phoned him up straight away and I said, change it to Hantec Systems. I said, it's short for Hannah Technical Systems. Hannah being my only child at the time. And like I said, I thought I invented the word until Google came out and actually discovered that Hantec is a slang, old Czech dialogue.
Oh.
Who knew?
Who knew?
Yeah.
Hantec.
And there's loads of companies around the world called Hantec now.
So you started the business in 95?
Yep, and still have client number one. Client number one bought my control manual, for £250, and they're still a client today. So little acorns.
How have you managed that?
Giving good service, doing what we say we're going to do, getting them from where they wanted to be, from where they were to where they wanted to be. So
that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
No round of golf, no beers at the bar.
We did have a couple of rounds of golf. In fact, which one of you two came to golf with me? It must have been you. This must have been during a school holiday. I'm playing golf with the boss, and Hannah ended up coming with me because she was under punishment, and the punishment was to come to golf with me.
Really fun punishment.
And
They're such cool parents.
yeah, and Bob, my client, said, well, she can drive the buggy. So that was her punishment for the day.
How old was she?
She must have been 6 or 7. Yeah, I don't know. God, that wasn't on the script.
No, it wasn't. I like to go off script. I do. So, and then I guess jumping back to going from being, I always find this question quite fascinating because I've kind of done it myself. in reverse, but you were employed and you had a secure wage coming in. You had a boss telling you what to do, some pressure, but not. So why did you make that jump from going from employed to being your own boss?
Probably for the same reason that most people go from being employed to being their own boss. They want to be in control of their own destiny, their own holiday time, their own income. They think they can do it as well, if not better, than their boss. And a lot of people do it better than their boss, which is nice. I don't know I wouldn't necessarily say I do it better than my boss, but at least as good. He taught me a lot of things. So yeah, that was the driver. Is until he gave me the opportunity to start my own business, I hadn't considered starting my own business.
And I think you touched on this a little bit, but it's hard to build a business today, never mind in the 90s. What was that like?
Um, the biggest problem, again, as most people who start their business discover, is that you just don't know what you're supposed to be doing. You know how to do your job, whatever that is. Screw things on the wall, write things in a procedure, whatever the thing is that you do. You know how to do that. But all of a sudden, you get told about things like VAT and tax, and you know you have to pay tax because you've been paying it, but you never had to worry about paying tax before because your boss just took the money from you and just gave you an envelope with what was left. But now all of a sudden, I've got to do a tax return, so you don't know about these things. And then, I mean, I was in compliance, but I didn't understand all of these other things that I had to be compliant with. And that's the biggest problem that all businesses face.
So then, in that time, there would have been multiple businesses around you that were in a similar position and
Yep.
lapped up what you were selling.
Yes, yes. I was very fortunate that right up until COVID, so from 1995 to 2020, I was fortunate in that I did not have to do any marketing. All of the work that we received was by referral, which is great because you're straight away you're going in with a warm lead, which is a nice place to be. COVID changed that a big lot, but that changed lots of things for lots of people.
Um, in terms of goals for the business at that time, or even a year or two or three after, was there a goal for the business when you started it?
I didn't have any goals. And again, when I speak to new clients, the first thing I ask them is, why are you doing what you're doing? What's the end game? And very, very few people can answer that question. And I was there. I started my own business. I remember saying to my wife, uh, I need to do this full time, but I don't have enough forward revenue to pay the mortgage at the end of the month. And she said, just do it. And I paid the mortgage at the end of the month and the following month and kept on doing that. Because that's what you do. That's what you do. But I never had any goals. I didn't have any idea about where I was going and how long I was going to be doing this for. No exit strategy, nothing. It was just, okay, let's carry on paying the mortgage until the mortgage is paid off and then I'll worry about it at that point.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but your dad had a business. And I guess when your parents have businesses or you're surrounded by people with businesses, you kind of take in pieces of advice and you learn from others, but that wasn't really the case.
So my dad, when he left the army, he always had his own business. He was very, very successful. He went bankrupt and he was very successful again. And it wasn't until some years after he had died, which was in 2002, so my business had been running for a number of years, that I realised that he did not teach me one lesson.
Would you have listened if he did?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You don't listen to your parents when they give you personal advice about you should do this, you should do that, you should do the other. But business is completely different because, again, we all don't know what we don't know. I mean, I would now say, that everybody should involve other people in their business, whether it's as a coach or a mentor or joining a peer group or whatever, because there's lots of our help out there. And, we we hear all the time, don't we? If you want to be the top golfer in the world has a coach. He practices every day, and the coach tells him where he's going wrong. The coach is not the top golfer in the world, but he's telling the top golfer in the world how to improve his game. So if we want to have the best business in the world, why would we not have a coach to help us in whatever format that is? Whether it's, like I say, a coach or a mentor or joining a peer group like peer-to-peer or Bizpedia or something like that.
We're going to move on to, you're going to help me explain what the Stuga story is.
Stuga, you got it right.
I said it wrong about 10 times when we were going over these questions.
Yeah, so that was, sorry.
No, yeah, please tell me what's Stuga?
So that was about being again in the right place at the right time. A client of mine, window warehouse in Portsmouth, they purchased this new machine called a Stuga machine, and I was reacquainted with a guy who owned the company, and he said, I'm really struggling with, and he listed some items, and I said, well, I can do that. Again, something that my previous boss had always taught me. If someone asks you, you can do something, you say yes, and then worry about it later. So I said, yeah, I can do that. And I started helping him. This was in about 2000, 2001. And I was programming the machines for him. So it was a huge machine, 15 meters by 5 meters. And what it basically does is makes the plastic windows, cuts it all up and does all the routing. He was very successful because it was a new innovation in the industry. But unfortunately, he didn't know how to run a business, and he admitted that. And he ended up going through a few managing directors who didn't know how to run his business. And in the end, in 2008, so this is after the crash, after the banking crash in 2008, in sheer desperation, and I was literally his desperate call. He said, I want you to run my business. So I took over as managing director, as I say, in 2008. The business was in such a place that it had to make a capital sale every month just to pay the overheads. And the machines were selling for £200,000. I kept the business running for 8 months without an order.
Kept the business running for 8 months without an order?
Yes.
How did you do that?
So he was getting very worried at this point, quite naturally, because he had personal guarantees to the tune of £300,000. So in the 8 months, I'd reduced that down to £120,000. But the main thing that I did was, there's 3 aspects to every business: the customer, the product, and the people. And if you haven't got those 3, you don't have a business. And as I say to my girls all the time, focus on what you can control. I couldn't control the product because I'm not an engineer. I couldn't control the product. And our product was the only English manufactured product. All the competition was German, but it was also the most unreliable. So I couldn't control that. We had a very unhappy workforce and exceptionally unhappy customers. I couldn't control those 2. So what I did is I made sure that we had the best customer service in the industry, and that's what we did. And as a result of that, whilst the customers had an unreliable machine, they had exceptional service, so they were happy to then have a very expensive service contract that I invented, and that's what kept us going. And also, as far as the staff were concerned, I realised that what I needed to do was to turn their attitudes around, and that again was very, very simple. It is very simple. The one message is just treat your staff the way you want to be treated, and then we had mutual respect, and they would do anything for me.
Yeah.
They would do anything for me.
And so did you then go on to co-own this business?
Yeah, so what happened in April 2009, as I said, we'd gone for 8 months without an order. I'm now sat with the administrator, and he said to me in my office in Great Yarmouth, so I was commuting from Southampton to Great Yarmouth, by the way. He said to me, one thing has to die. This business or you. You cannot keep this going any longer. So, yeah. So at that point, I had to take the business into administration, which was the worst day of my life. So that I can remember the day. It was a Friday. I think it was April the 6th, coincidentally. And I had my two directors, so the owner of the business and the sales director, sat at the end of the table with the administrator, and I had to make 50% of my workforce redundant before I took the business into administration. Wasn't a nice thing to do.
And I've got in my notes here dealing with letting people down.
Yeah, absolutely. So I felt that I'd let them down, and so I called in my PA first of all. I needed her to be the first person I spoke to. She wasn't going to be made redundant, but I needed her to now keep the records of what was going to happen next. And I then called one at a time, 40 people in total, and made 50% of them redundant. It took me 2 hours, and I never stopped for a break. And the three people at the end of the table, which was the two directors and the administrator, did not say one word for the whole 2 hours. And at the end of it, I stood up and my sales director said, "I have no idea how you just did that." And I walked out onto the factory floor, and every single one of my staff was on the factory floor waiting for me, including the ones that I'd made redundant, to thank me for the effort that I'd made in trying to prevent what just happened, which was the most touching thing that's ever happened in business. We then went into administration and then did a deal with the administrator, restarted the business. Wasn't your typical Phoenix. The only person that lost money was HMRC. So we dumped the VAT and the PAYE, but all of the suppliers, I did a deal with every single one of them to repay their debt over the next 12 months. And they said that's fine. And then they continued dealing with us on a cash on delivery basis. So we had to finance the business out of our own pockets for 12 months, which the two co-directors that we then became 3 equal partners. Gareth, the technical director who used to own the business 100%, he had lots of savings. My sales director had a big pension pot, and I had several credit cards, and that's how we financed the business for the next 12 months. And successfully created a multi-million-pound business.
So you've just gone from making, did you say 15? How many did you make redundant?
50%, so 20 people. Yeah.
50% redundant, and then you kept it going even after all of that, and then built it to a multi-million-pound business.
Yes.
Then what did you do in 2013? What did you do in 2013?
Walked away from it.
Why?
So I already said it was a business in Great Yarmouth. I was commuting to Great Yarmouth, sometimes on a daily basis. I had 2 co-owners, one younger than me, absolute technical genius. He lived 20 minutes from the factory. I would arrive work before him, and he would go home before me. So that just sort of told you a little bit about his work ethic. And my sales director, who's much older than me, had been in the industry all of his life, and he said to me once, "I've got 30 years experience in this industry, or 30 years experience in management." And then my accountant said to me one day, "Has he got 30 years experience, or has he got 1 year's experience that he has just done 30 times?" And that again made me understand that he was a great sales director, but he couldn't run a business. So the business was killing me physically, driving to Great Yarmouth and driving all over the country, but also I wasn't getting back the same effort from my 2 co-owners. And then 2013, so my mother had already been diagnosed with incurable lung cancer. And on the day that I sat in the solicitors and my accountants with my 2 co-owners negotiating my exit, my wife informed me that her mother had just been diagnosed with cancer. And we subsequently ended up losing both mothers within 11 weeks of each other. So focus on what's important, and working with these two guys was not important, even though I walked away from a very big salary. And as I say, we created a multi-million-pound business, which they sold last year for several million. So I do know for a fact that I missed out on at least £2 million.
But also, I think it's safe to say that you did a good job. You know that you're good at what you do.
Yes.
That's
And my accountant did remind me that I probably didn't walk away from that because I probably would be dead. Either by drinking too much or driving too fast or...
ignoring the missus.
Yeah.
That's the lot. I know that. And also, whilst you've been talking, I've been looking at my questions. I'm thinking, well, at this time you're still running Hantec.
Yes.
That's still going on.
Yes. I'd employed a guy, my next door neighbour. He still works for us. He's been working for us now for over 20 years. He's now semi-retired in Portugal. We'd also built up a second business in security screening, vetting people. So yes, still running that at the same time.
So we're at 2013.
Yeah.
When did Hannah join?
So Hannah didn't join until 2018, but Lucy joined first. So she joined when she was only 15, so she was working part-time while she was going to school. So by then in 2013, I'd separated the Hantec business. We were doing two things. We were doing ISO consultancy and also security screening. So I separated the business and created National Security Screening Agency, which Lucy was working in. And by the time she was 19, she was running that business full-time, doing all of the accounts and new orders and looking after the 9 people that we employed. And Hannah joined in 2018, so she was a primary school teacher, and then she came to work in compliance.
So just you kind of briefed over that a little bit. So
Yeah.
National Security Screening Agency.
Yes.
What is that?
So it is what it says on the tin. We did security screening. We vetted people, primarily in the security industry. I started doing it in 1994. And as I say, we were doing it as a value-added service in Hantec, but it became so big that I created a separate limited company, which we sold in November 2017.
Okay. All right. Speaking of daughters, what happens when you employ your daughters? And I've got in brackets, that's Hannah's question.
Yeah.
It's a family thing, right?
It's a family thing. So yeah, you just realise that when you employ your daughters, you realise that you've just got no control over your personal life or your business life anymore. Yeah, Lucy's just recently come back to the business. She's been away for a couple of years, and she's come back, and she picked up the security screening, and she just went, "What have you two been doing? What have you been up to?" And she's now sorting that out, so that's great. But it's good. The thing is that some people, and I'm one of those people, will say, "No one does it as good as me." You can't trust someone to do the job as good as you can do it, either for whatever reason. You know, employees, some employees, not all, but some employees just want a 9-to-5 job, and that's great. I'm not knocking that at all. I used to be a 9-to-5 employee. But if you're fortunate enough to have either a really good class employee or a member of your family that has the same work ethic as you, then that's great. You can rely on them 100%.
And when we were talking about questions, you did touch on that when you talk to a potential client about ISO and compliance, some of them may not understand it, care, or want it. But then when you talk about them handing down their business to a family member, well, then it's a different ballgame.
Yeah. We by default work with a lot of family businesses. That's just happened. And a lot of my clients are my age or older, and they started their businesses for similar reasons to why I started my business. And especially in the security industry, they've had regulation and compliance rammed down their throats by the regulators. And they're not interested. They just want to get on and run their business, and that's fine. And I've got one particular client. He's now handing his business down to his three daughters, and he's been a client and personal friend for 25 years. And he said to me, "I was prepared to duck and dodge all of these bullets, but I don't want the same for my three daughters. Now I want you to do compliance properly in my business," which was great because, he doesn't want his daughters to have to worry. He wants his business now to be squeaky clean, and meet every regulation so that they can just get on and do their job and not have to worry.
And be successful at it.
And they're very successful at it.
And this model works.
And
Exactly that.
this model does work, and it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. In fact, non-compliance costs a lot more than compliance.
Have any examples of that? Slightly off topic there, but.
Well, you've only got to read the papers. I mean, health and safety, GDPR, they're the two biggest ones that I'd say to people, I always paint the blackest picture. I do that deliberately because I don't want people to think that that it's just nothing horrible is going to happen. So I always paint the blackest of picture, because if I tell you nothing's going to go wrong and something goes wrong, then you're not going to have a lot of respect for me. But if I tell you the worst that can happen and it never happens, then that's great. We're set up for that. So the worst that can happen in health and safety is that someone dies, you go to prison.
If you killed them.
No, corporate manslaughter.
Or in the business.
Yeah. So we're here in the OBS. There's the employer over there. If one of his staff dies and it is proved to be negligence on his part, he goes to prison. It's that simple. So that's the worst that can happen. How often does that happen? Quite often. It just doesn't make the national press. It really doesn't. I get notifications from the HSE every single week, not of people going to prison, but of prosecutions. And it's the same with data protection. The worst that can happen, and everyone's seen the headline figures when it came out in 2018, the worst that can happen is €20 million fine. Has there been any? Yes, there has. Not in this country, but there have been some big fines. But when that first came out, everyone did loads of work. We better put some policies in place, and that's fine. But the regulators don't have the resources to come and inspect us. That's just a fact. The same with health and safety. So the only time that you'll get investigated, is if my words, is if you get reported. So as I say to all of my clients, the biggest threat to every organisation is within the organisation. That's the biggest threat. Not necessarily by a deliberate action, but by an accident. Incorrectly send the email to the wrong person. It gets reported. You get investigated. As soon as you get reported, you get investigated. And most people comply with most of health and safety. I've yet to find a business that complies with the UK GDPR. There is not one. So that means that we're all operating illegally. So if I just say, for example, every single business has to have a record of processing activities.
Okay.
And if you have employees, you must have an appropriate policy document. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you don't have those, which means you're not complying with the law.
Does that apply to all businesses that are registered as sole traders limited?
Every
one
single
person,
business. Every single business.
5,000.
Every single business. But it's not difficult to comply. It's not difficult to comply because the regulators provide you with all the information free of charge. You don't need a consultant.
But if you want one.
Yeah. So it really isn't difficult to comply with regulation. It is actually very simple because they provide you with all the information. The HSE and the ICO, for example, they want you to be compliant. They don't want to catch you out. That's not what that's why they provide you with all the free information. The ICO provide free videos so that you can deliver training to your staff, which is a legal requirement.
I guess guess this is kind of like business insurance.
Yeah,
It's one of those reluctant purchases that I'll put that off, and then, oh, I've had an accident, or my client tripped, or I've lost a client, millions. It's the risk factor.
yeah.
Kind of playing with
Mm.
standing
But-
on an edge, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. But what we do, as I said, ISO is a consequence of what we do. What we do is this, and as a consequence, you could, if you wanted to, have these ISO certificates if they're important to you, but you will most definitely be compliant to health and safety law and UK data protection law, because it's relatively simple to do. It just needs a little bit of work.
I'm going to jump to a risky year that we all went through in 2020.
Oh, it was a great year.
Yeah. Something not many of us kind of planned for, if not all. What was your plan? What was your goal for 2020?
So 2019, I was a non-executive compliance director for a number of businesses. We were doing exceptionally well, and I knew that 2020 was the year when all debts were settled, except for the mortgage, which would only have not many years to go, and I was going to semi-retire and do 3 days a week.
2020 happened. What happened in one day?
Lost 65% of my business in one single day.
How did that feel?
It was interesting.
Colourful word.
Yeah, but what was also interesting was that in the first 2 months of lockdown, I'd never worked so long and so hard in my life. I was literally in my office from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. Lucy used to physically drag me out of the office for lunch and dinner, and just constantly on Teams or Zoom, which no one knew existed, helping clients understand what was happening. What's furlough? No idea. I couldn't even say it. Furlough. What's furlough? I couldn't even say it. And then the one particular client, I was the compliance director on the holdings board of a group of companies. So I had to have board meetings at group and then board meetings with each of the 5 businesses, and they're all going into administration. It's going to happen. And it was very, very stressful. But one of the, I didn't tell you this, one of the biggest pleasures I got out of COVID was helping the local pub understand COVID and understand furlough. Yeah, that was good. Telling the local pub owner how they should operate the furlough scheme and to pay their staff.
By drinking beer? Why was that?
Oh, it was just good because they weren't a client of mine, so I was just helping them out for free because why not? I never had anything else to do. And when I spoke to a business associate of mine afterwards, I said that was so more enjoyable working for free than working for a client. And he said it's because the expectation is different. There's no expectation from the client for you to produce something that they've got to pay for. So they're more relaxed. And the expectation from you is that you'd have to produce this wonderful thing that they've got to pay for. It's a completely different relationship. And it was the end of that year as well that over Christmas dinner, and I said to Hannah, we've all gone through this really bad year, businesses, everyone's talking about business. I didn't see any reports about how it was affecting charities. And then I remembered the conversation I had with Stephen about the pub. And I said, right, okay, what we're going to do when we come out of lockdown, we're going to work with 2 local charities for free and help them with whatever we can help them with. So at the Rainbow Centre in Fareham, Hannah delivered motivational maps to all of the conductors, which went down an absolute storm. And my health and safety consultant did a workplace and fire risk assessment of their building. And then and now we're working with My Time Young Carers in Bournemouth, and we're helping them with all of their business compliance. So that's fun.
Let's talk a little bit more about, do we want to talk about long-term prevention strategy, or do we want to talk about attitudes towards ISO compliance today?
Let's combine the two.
Let's do that.
So long-term prevention strategy. What do we all do when we get a cold? We got a cold. So we'll go and buy loads of cold and flu remedies. So we wait until the problem happens. What we don't do is the prevention, which is make sure we take the right vitamins, etc., etc. People wait, and I did the same. I waited until I was too lumpy before I decided to do something about it. You know, the diet industry in the world is billions of dollars. So instead of the prevention, which is eating healthily, doing a little bit of exercise regularly, no, we wait until it's too much of a problem, and then we have to all this hard work. And compliance is exactly the same. We don't do the little tiny bits of prevention along the way. We wait until the problem happens. But attitudes are changing. And this is what I like about having my daughters work with me, because the younger generation, I can say that because I'm old, the younger generation, in my opinion, have a completely different attitude to life-work balance. Not work-life balance, life-work balance. They want to, they're quite happy to do the long hours, and they are, my daughters are, well, one of them, quite happy to do the long hours and do the work, but they want a life, and they want to focus on the thing that makes them the money. And that's what I say to my clients. You focus on what makes you money. Because looking after compliance doesn't make you any money. So that's my job. So our younger clients have a different attitude to compliance. They just want it sorted. They don't want to have to worry about it at all. Whereas my clients went out of their way to dodge the bullets, our younger clients just say, sort it out. I don't want to worry about it. I don't want to have to go to bed worrying about, do I comply with this or that or the other. Just sort it out, because I want to focus on making some good money doing what I do, and then having a good life at the weekend.
Outsourcing the things you either don't like or are good at, which I think is
Yeah. I mean,
a new concept.
But it's a new old concept. But focus on what you're good at. You know, we had Lee. I think most people know Lee Harris. So Lee Harris cleans our car. Now, how lazy am I cleaning the car? It costs me £50 a month to have my car absolutely pristine. It takes it takes him 2 hours today. Hour and a half. Now, okay, I could do an hour and a half a month and save myself 50 quid. Or I could do my job for an hour and a half, which will make me a lot more than 50 quid. It's easy. It's an easy decision. Because I want my weekends as well, because that's the only time I'm going to clean my car. And the same with accountancy. We could all do our own accounts. We could all maintain our own cars.
We're not trying to tempt our own marketing.
Yeah? No, we can't. So focus on what you're good at, and let somebody else do all the other boring stuff.
Speaking of what you're good at, what's happening with Hantec now? Where are you within?
Great. So we've got 3 legs to our stool. There's our ISO business compliance that we've been doing for years and years and years. And that will continue. That's our bread and butter. Lucy's back in the team. So we started doing security screening again because of what COVID did to us. I wasn't intending on doing it, but now we are. So now Lucy's back on the team. Now we're really going to hit that again. I built a £500,000 business once before, so we'll do it again. And then the third leg of the stool is peer-to-peer, which some people will know about. So I've been a member of peer-to-peer for 12 years. I was a chairman in 2018, and I am a chairman again now. So Hannah and I launched our peer-to-peer board in February. We operate out of New Place Hotel. If people haven't met Simon Hawtrey-Coombs, where have you been? Have a look at peer-to-peer at OBS. It's completely complimentary. And if you like what you see, then join a board. There's plenty of them. Ours is at New Place. There's others in Bartley and Lywood. So that's our 3 legs to our stool. I'm also, so as I said to you pre-COVID, I was a non-exec director for a number of companies. I've just been, a month ago, I was asked by a client, 9 million turnover, to be their non-exec chair of their board. So that again, that's really good.
What do you enjoy about being a non-exec chair?
People listen to me. No. No, it's good. I get to challenge the client, and that's what they wanted.
Yeah.
They're running an exception. This was a business that was launched post-COVID. So I mentioned that we lost 65% of our business in one day. Well, a couple of those directors then reformed a new business. So it's a brand new business. They're knocking it out of the park. But they realised that they need somebody to look after them so that they can focus on what they do best, which is deliver their service. But they need to make sure that their board meetings are run correctly, the compliance is correctly done, they're meeting their requirement under company law. So, yeah, and they've entrusted me to do that because that's what they saw pre-COVID.
And I got two final questions here, which we did not run through, and there are not many answers. Please do not scream, you are live on Lucy's phone. What has been your biggest achievement in business yet?
Hantec Systems has been running for 28 years this month.
Woo. And I would imagine throughout that 28 years, there has been some ups and downs, lessons learned.
Yes.
Which leads me on to my final question. If there is one piece of advice you would give everyone here, what would that be? What's that one nugget that you would just give away for free?
Okay, one nugget in 3 parts.
Go for it.
And it's the three rules we have in our family. Never go to bed on an argument.
Agreed.
You never know what's around the corner.
Even with a cat, because you never know what you're going to wake up to.
Exactly. I have literally dragged one of my daughters back out of her bedroom because you're not going to bed on an argument.
She's got her head down. Lucy.
Number two is see it like it, buy it, because we're not coming back. So that was picked up from a cruise ship, the very first cruise we did in 2006. And
Which cruise line?
I beg your pardon?
Which cruise line?
Norwegian Cruise Lines. Yeah, it was around the Caribbean, and the cruise director said, "If you see, we're stopping at all these islands, and if you see something and you like it, buy it because we're not coming back." And we've said that ever since. See it, like it, buy it, and basically what that means is you get one chance at this life. Live the best life. And then the final rule is it will be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, then it's not the end.
Round of applause for Paul Williams. Oh, emotional there at the end. That's a good third one. A good finish, that.
I've got that on the wall in the office. A friend of mine bought it for me.
Very nice.
But yeah.
This is the bit where we throw it to the audience. If you've got any questions, now's your chance. Go for it, Carl.
I found it fascinating. I've worked in branding for 30 years, so you made a comment right at the beginning about your family. And I was going to ask you how that, because I believe brand is all about the effects of our life. And you made so many answers to my question because you have a family business. You also said that you do it stuff yourself, you trust yourself more than anything, but you've allowed the trust to your own family, where actually growing up, you had very little trust in your family. You said that your father never gave you anything. So my question really was, from those early experiences, what of that do you bring to what you do well? You obviously care, you've got a hell of a lot of integrity with those people that you had to let go. But I wanted to go back right to the beginning. What is it that those early experiences brought into your life that have so much profound effect?
So my early recollections of life are sitting on my dad's knee because he's come to visit us which he did every week. And my sister would be sat next to my mum. We would both be crying because these two are just constantly arguing. I don't know how old I was then. It was very early. It was definitely